Hey guys, this is Will at Third and Long. Today we are going to be breaking down the Week 2 football games for the 2023 college football season, who won, who lost, and maybe how things stack up for the rest of the year. So hit that like button and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get started. Coming in at number 1, we had the Georgia Bulldogs. They were hosting Ball State. This was kind of a boring game starting out here, so pretty much Georgia, they really need to get the offense going. Carson Beck went 23 of 30, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, but no number 1 running back. Roderick Robinson II only had 38 yards. Dion Bell only had 28 yards rushing. So while they can get away with that playing Ball State, who just got blown out by Kentucky last weekend, they really need to establish the running game because they're going to be playing better offenses as the year goes on. They only had 386 yards of total offense versus Ball State. That is not good enough. They really need to step the game up there. The defense is still great. They only gave up 224 yards. Georgia did win 45-3, but the offense is still a major concern going into week 3 as of right now. They haven't done anything to fall out of the number 1 spot, but as the other teams behind them start doing better, they haven't necessarily done anything to hold on to that number 1 spot also. Next game, we had number 2 Michigan hosting UNLV. So Harbaugh still suspended. He has one more game left on that self-imposed suspension. Michigan did win 35-7. Now, Michigan's basically keeping things safe. They have the coordinators acting as the coach while Harbaugh is out. So they're not wanting to do anything to put the team out of position. So they're just playing safe. They're just trying to get through these 3 games, win. Once Harbaugh comes back, I really think they are going to open up the playbook and open up the floodgates and start trying to run scores up on teams. That's basically what everybody does these days. But J.J. McCarthy was very efficient. 22 of 25, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Blake Corum looked great, 15 carries, 80 yards. Now, as a total offense, they had 492 yards. They only gave up 229 yards. So the defense still looks great. UNLV got basically a garbage time touchdown, or it would have been a shutout. Michigan looks good, although they're not really scoring that many points, but like I said, they're not really doing anything as of right now. They're just waiting for Harbaugh to get back. Now, next game was the game of the weekend. We had number 3 Alabama hosting number 11 Texas. This was a great game. I did pick Texas to win this game, so we were calling for the upset for this one last week when we went over this game. Texas won 34-24. And basically the reason that they won, number 1, Quinn Ewers played. He was out last year because he got knocked out the first quarter. He went 24 of 38, 349 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Lot of help from the wide receivers. Sanders, 5 receptions, 114 yards. Mitchell, 3 for 78 yards. Worthy with that huge catch, 5 receptions for 75 yards and 1 touchdown. So Steve Sarkisian, from the jump, was on the gas pedal the whole game, going vertical, throwing it down Bama's throat. Bama's secondary was not good this game. A lot of question marks left after on Bama's defense this game. Jalen Milroe, he went 14 of 27, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 really costly picks, both in the red zone. He looked like he was ready to run too much to me. So every time there was pressure in the pocket, he was so quick to scramble. I don't think that's necessarily a good sign of some of the games to come. Now, he is still the starter, but Bama has a lot of question marks. I didn't think Bama was as good this year. I did think that they'd go probably 10-2 this year. They have a pretty decently tough schedule. A lot of question marks on offense. They don't really know what they're doing. They really have no run game. For wanting to be a run-heavy team, where's running back number 1? They have no weapons at wide receiver. So if you can't run the ball, then you have to go vertical. But who's your threat? So Texas outgained them 454 yards to 362 yards. So great win for Sarkisian, and he did what a lot of people had been asking him to do. Stay on the gas the whole game. So Texas is definitely moving up there, and Alabama moving down. Number 4, Florida State hosted Southern Miss. I think Florida State was only picked to win by Vegas by 20-something points. They blew Southern Mississippi out of the water, winning 66-13. They played as well as they could have possibly played. Now, Jordan Travis didn't have the best game, 15-29, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, but they really didn't have to because this game really didn't matter. The good thing for Florida State is there was no layover from beating LSU. So they picked up right where they left off. beating the brakes off of Southern Mississippi. 454 yards to they only gave up 258 yards. So a complete game from Florida State. They are making the case to be number one. Now, I'm not saying they're the number one team, but they are making the case to potentially be moving up into that number one spot. Because like I said, as the season goes on, Georgia hasn't done anything to hold on to it so far. Next game, we had number 5, Ohio State hosting Youngstown State. So Jim Tressel's team coming into Ohio State. This game was a complete snooze fest. Basically, Kyle McCord looked better than last weekend. He went 14 of 20, 258 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I'm not impressed by the Buckeyes only putting 35 points on an FCS team. How is that possible? Ryan Day is known for his offenses. I thought for sure they would get 60 points this weekend because I was sitting there thinking Ryan Day has to be aggressive to make up for what happened last weekend. He really wants to get the offense clicking on all cylinders. But they did the complete opposite. They basically came in and they laid an egg. Where's the rushing play? They were going to be a run-heavy team this year. That didn't happen. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. did look good this weekend, but that's about it. So look at their total yardage. 482 yards versus an FCS team. Defense looked great. That's not going to carry. Now, Notre Dame, who plays them in 2 weeks, cannot wait to play the Buckeyes. I'm sorry. They moved down last weekend in the AP Top 25. They should continue to fall every single week as they fail to score 40 points versus horrible teams. Last week it was Indiana. This week it's Youngstown State. They need to get to 40 if they hope to have any chance to beat Notre Dame soon. So a lot of concerns coming out of Ohio State right now. Next game we had number 6 USC hosting Stanford. A lot of people thought that Stanford was actually going to keep this game close. USC beat the brakes out of them, 56-10. Caleb Williams picked up exactly where he has the whole season, 19 of 21. Only 2 incompletions, 281 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. This team is stacked. As a complete team, their total stats. So USC, 573 yards. They only gave up 349 yards. Now, Stanford had a really strong game 1. USC, this is back-to-back weeks that their defense has given up less than 14 points. I think that's a strong point, although defense is still the major concern for the Trojans. The fact that they haven't given up that many points the last 2 weeks, yeah, it's not good competition that they played, but still, baby steps. That defense is slowly getting better, and they need to be much improved over last year because the Pac-12 is loaded this year. There's going to be a lot of really good offenses that they have to play, but USC looked really strong this week, so good for them. Next, we had number 7 Penn State hosting FCS Delaware. Now, they beat Delaware the way that Ohio State should have beat Youngstown State. So, Penn State wins 63-7. Drew Aller looked great. He looked exactly like the 5-star quarterback that he was supposed to be looking like this year. 22 of 26, 204 yards. Running game looked great with Allen there. Now, as a total team, Penn State 541 yards. They only gave up 140 yards. Manny Diaz and that defense look great. James Franklin has to be really happy right now because as of the way things are looking 3 weeks into the season, Penn State looks like the number 2 team in the Big Ten with the Buckeyes number 3 and with the Wolverines number 1. So Penn State is in a really strong position right now and they're really making themselves known. Now the next game that we had coming up was the Washington Huskies hosting Tulsa. Tulsa is a pretty decent team. They can move the ball, but Washington State won 43-10. Penix looked great. Back-to-back games over 400 yards. He went 28 of 38, 409 yards, 3 touchdowns. They look great on offense. Defense played pretty decent this week. They had 563 yards of total offense, only gave up 318 yards. So Washington looks really good this year. The Pac-12 is just so loaded. It is going to be a gauntlet for all these Pac-12 teams that are in the top 10. Next game, number 9 Tennessee hosted Austin Peay. This was just pathetic. They won 30-13 versus an FCS team. Tennessee's really starting to take steps backwards right now. So Joe Milton goes 21 of 33, 228 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's it, versus an FCS team. Now, there's a lot of fans calling for him to get benched and for them to break out the 5-star quarterback that they just brought in. those calls are going to start getting louder. So Josh Heupel definitely hears it. They only had 456 yards of total offense, and they gave up 339 yards of offense. So a lot of question marks on Tennessee right now. They have Florida this weekend. I don't really know what's going on. They should definitely start moving backwards in the poll, just like the Buckeyes, because this is an offensively focused team. How are they only getting 30 points versus FCS foes? It's week 2. They should be getting better every week. They looked worse than last week, and they didn't necessarily look good last week. So Josh Heupel is an offensive guru. I do think he will right the ship, but at some point you do have to start to wonder, will Joe Milton get benched at some point this year? But Tennessee did get the win. Next, we had number 10 Notre Dame at NC State. This was a really competitive game, tough environments for Sam Hartman to go into. He's never really played that well versus the Wolfpack, but they got the win 45-24. This was kind of an odd game. So tough atmosphere, good road game. There was the lightning delay, then it rained. First half was really close. Second half, Notre Dame beat the brakes off them, basically. They got really physical, and they started to run the ball really well. Sam Hartman went 15-24, 286 yards, 4 touchdowns. Estimate another 100-yard game. He had 14 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Notre Dame is, to me, the most impressive team so far this year. Now, I'm not saying that they're the number 1 team. They are one of the only teams with 3 games so far this year, but they've had some of the best 3-rounded performances this year. Looking good every single game. This was a quality win versus a quality opponent. Total, they had 456 yards, and they gave up 344 yards. So that defense still played really good versus Armstrong. Freeman has to be really happy right now. They have the Buckeyes in 2 weeks. They want to play the Buckeyes right now while things aren't clicking. And if they beat the Buckeyes, and the way things are looking right now, that's definitely the more likely possibility so far. They will definitely be jumping into that top 4 to me if they beat the Buckeyes in 2 weeks. Next, we had number 12, Utah at Baylor. This was the second most boring game of the weekend next to the Iowa State game. But basically, it was a battle of the backups. Both teams didn't have their starters, Shippen being out and Cam Rising still being out. It was just atrocious. No one could move the ball. There was a lot of turnovers here. So Utah, 377 yards. Baylor, 339 yards. Baylor had the game. The whole game up to the fourth quarter, and then Utah got really physical and took it from them. Kyle Whittingham, as I always say, the most underappreciated coach in the country. Utes get the win. They're number 12. Do I think they deserve to be number 12? No. I do not think that they will finish the year number 12, but I'm fine with them being there now because their time will come, because if the most that you can get is 20 points right now, you will not fare very well in the Pac-12. There's a lot of high-powered offenses coming to town, even with Cam Rising. I do not think that they can keep up with them, but they did get the win, and they survive one more week being in that top 12. Next, we had the Oregon Ducks, number 13, at Texas Tech. Another really good out-of-conference team. Texas Tech is 0-2, so they lose this game 38-30. Do not sleep on Texas Tech. They are a way better team than their record shows. I think I picked this game to be 38-31, so pretty close there. But pretty much Texas Tech had the whole game. They had the whole game up to the very end. Oregon had 20 points in the fourth quarter, took the game right out of their hands. Shaw, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks for Texas Tech. So that's pretty much why they lost the game, was all of the constant turnovers. Bo Nix looked great, 32 of 44, 359 yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran for 46 yards. So the offense for Oregon looks really good. Defense, not so much. They did give up 456 yards, but they had 472 yards. But I'm not too concerned about this game because I'm actually pretty high on Texas Tech. I do still think that they're an 8-9 win team, even with these 2 losses here. So don't hold that against the Ducks. Although the Ducks, they better get the defense right, because when they play Washington, when they play USC, when they play the Bruins, there's going to be some shootouts there. So they definitely have to right that portion, but still a very good quality win on the road versus a quality Power 5 team. Next game, we had number 14 hosting Grambling. Obviously, this was going to be a blowout, 72-10. Now, Brian Kelly, Jaden Daniels, they wanted to get a lot off of their shoulders after what happened last week versus Florida State. Jaden Daniels, 18 to 24, 269 yards, 5 touchdowns. So LSU looked great, but really they should look great because they were playing a FCS team. They beat them the way that they're supposed to, the way that Ohio State should have beat the Buckeyes, the way that Tennessee should have beat Austin Peay, but they both didn't. LSU did. 622 yards of total offense, and they only gave up 320 yards. Now, I picked LSU to lose last week versus Florida State, so I'm not buying in. I have thought that they were overrated. This is a 9-win team here, but they're still a good team. That's not anything because they were a 9-win team last year. I never thought that they were more than that. They are getting better, but they were overrated coming into this year. But they played well this weekend, and they got that win, like I said, 72-10. Next game, number 15, Kansas State hosting Troy. So this was a pretty good performance by Kansas State. Now, I do think Kansas State is also overrated, but they are the defending Big 12 champs, and they've played very well so far this year. So Will Howard, 21 of 32, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Do I think Kansas State is the number 15 team in the country? No. Do I think they're going to finish the year there? No. Could they be a fringe top 25 team? Yes, I would be surprised if they go 8-4, 9-3 at best once they get into conference play. So they're a little overrated right now, but I'm fine. They did get that win, 42-13. They had 397 yards of offense. They need to get those offensive numbers up because once they start playing the Sooners, Texas Tech, TCU, they're going to have to move the ball. But it was still a good win versus a quality team. The next game that we're looking at is going to be number 16, Oregon State hosting UC Davis. So I feel so bad for Oregon State. This is probably the best team they've had in a really long time. And just coincidentally, the Pac-12 is probably the best it has ever been. And Oregon State has no home going into next year. But they did get the win 55-7. DJU looked great for the short time that he played. He went 8 of 13, 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they didn't really feel the need to run the score up because it really didn't matter. They were running the ball well. They had 450 yards of total offense, only gave up 166 yards versus a pretty decent UC Davis FCS team. But they ran the ball for 269 yards. So Oregon State looks great. They got a pretty good win here. Like we've been saying, the Pac-12 is loaded, so it's definitely going to get tougher from this point forward. But so far, I'm really happy for the Beavers. Next game, we had number 17, the North Carolina Tar Heels at Appalachian State. They got the win here, 40-34. This was not a good game at all. So this pretty much picked up exactly where it left off last year. I think last year was like a triple overtime, 58-60 or something like that. So they go into double overtime. They win 40-34. Drake May has not looked good so far this year. I don't know if that's because Phil Longo's gone and now he has Philip Lindsay calling plays, so he's very run heavy, but he has not picked up where he left off last year so much. So that Heisman talk, that's pretty much gone at this point. He went 21 of 30, 208 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks. But Hampton, 26 carries, 234 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he basically carried North Carolina to the win. Last week, it was the defense. This week, the defense was completely pathetic. It was what the Tar Heels defense should be, what we all thought it actually is. So it went right back to that after they had 9 sacks. Last week, they had 0 sacks this week. So things are back to normal for Gene Chizik's defense there. But they did have 527 yards of offense. They gave up 494 yards versus Appalachian State. So things have come full circle, and the Tar Heels are who they thought they were, basically. So no surprise there. Defense is garbage. The big surprise is Drake May so far does not look comfortable in this offense. He should have been in the air raid with Phil Longo. Next game, we had number 18 Oklahoma hosting SMU. Now, a lot of people see this final score here, 28-11. I'm not too concerned about that because SMU under Rhett Lashley won the transfer portal there. They did really well. This is a pretty decent SMU team. Next year, they will be in the ACC. They're an 8-9 win team right now. So don't look down on that score so much now. The Sooners should have scored more. So Dylan Gabriel did go 19 of 27, 176 yards, 4 touchdowns. Walker had over 100 yards rushing. So the Sooners' offense looked okay, but they were actually outgained. 365 yards of total offense versus 367 to SMU. Now, last week, I think Oklahoma had 73 or something like that. I think they had 73 points. So I don't know how they went from that down to 28. Yes, it was a better team, but you should be able to score more than 28 versus SMU. You're going to be playing way better teams than SMU this year. You better be able to get 40 every single game once you start playing Texas and Texas Tech. So kind of concerning there, but they got a good win versus a good quality out-of-conference team. So I'm not too concerned, but yet still the offense needs to get back to what they were doing previously. But Oklahoma did get the win there. Next, this was a surprise here to me. We had number 19 Wisconsin losing to Washington State. So they lost 31 to 22. I don't know what's going on with the offense. Tanner Mordecai and Phil Longo, they've just never looked comfortable together. I definitely thought Mordecai was going to be better once he transferred out of SMU to the air raid at Wisconsin. But maybe it's just too big of a change for that system because that was such a run-heavy system basically forever. And now they're going air raid, well, power air raid. But it just hasn't gotten clicking. But they should be getting better every single week. But Mordecai did go 25 of 40, 278 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, Braylon Allen and Chez Malusi last week each had like 130 yards each rushing. Malusi this week, 49 yards, Allen 20 yards. So I don't know what happened in the running game, but Washington State completely shut it down. That is not a good sign because they're going to be playing some top 10 defenses this year. Once they play Michigan, you have Penn State. I'm just saying their conference is loaded with great defensive play. Even if they're not playing them during the regular season, they will be playing better defenses. And they really need to get the air raid going. So very concerning from the Badgers so far at this point of the year. But yet, congratulations to Washington State. Starting out the year really strong. Cameron Ward, 20 of 32, 202 yards passing. So the air raid's looking really good at Washington State still. They won. They only had 332 yards of offense, but Wisconsin only had 368 yards. They need to get that. I picked them to win 8-9 games this year. That's not going to happen if they don't get Tanner and Mordecai going in that air raid system. Next game we have number 20 Ole Miss at number 24 Tulane. Now, this game was kind of surprising here because Tulane was without their great quarterback Sims. So they were basically down to Kai Horton, and I've been high on Lane Kiffin. Now, I didn't think they were a top 15 team, but I always think that Lane Kiffin is a top 25 team. After this game, pathetic showing from the Ole Miss Rebels. Jackson Dart, 17 of 27, 267 yards. But this game was close down to the very end because Ole Miss had 20 points in the fourth quarter. So up to the fourth quarter, what was the score? 17 to 17 versus Tulane with their backup quarterback. That just makes absolutely no sense at all, especially when they scored 70 points last week. Now, Ole Miss could only muster 363 yards of offense versus Tulane when they're playing with their backup quarterback, whereas Tulane had 342 yards. So basically even. So although they got the win by double digits, 37 to 20. Nonetheless, a little concerning there because that should only be a close game if Tulane has their full team. Without it, they should have beat the brakes off of them. So they're going to be playing better teams in the SEC. They better get that righted. Duke, number 21, hosting Lafayette. Duke wins 42 to 7. There's not really much to say about this game. So Riley Leonard goes 12 of 12, 136 yards. So basically, Duke did what they always do. They run the ball, they play conservative, and they win the game. They're just hoping to not get anyone hurt and to just continue the season as a full roster. They had 515 yards of total offense, only gave up 213 yards. So all that's good. They did run the ball for 261 yards. So a good, solid Duke win there. And like I said, they got that win 42 to 7. The next game that we're looking at is Nebraska was at number 22 Colorado. I did pick Colorado to win this game. I just thought that they'd win it by about 10 points. It was very close the whole game till the very end. Nebraska just got wore out. Matt Rule has a lot of thinking to do. So Satterfield is a horrible offensive coordinator. I did not understand that hire. Jeff Sims just keeps messing up. Their offense is horrible. What have they scored? 24 points in 2 weeks? So 12 points per game. Not good. Not good. It's a complete overhaul of the roster, but they're definitely a better team. They're a more disciplined team, but a lot of question marks there from the Cornhuskers. Whereas Colorado basically picked off right where they were last week. Now, they got a slower start because they were playing a better, more disciplined defensive team. So first half, things were close. The guys were not getting open. Things were very physical. Second half, Nebraska just got wore out. So Sanders, 31 of 42 yards. 31 of 42, 393 yards. So almost back-to-back, over 400-yard games. Colorado looks great so far. Total offense, they had 454 yards, and Nebraska had 341. So good win versus a Power 5 team for Colorado. So congratulations to Deion Sanders. He continues to do what people thought was not possible. Next game, I did call this upset as well. We had number 3, Texas A&M coming to Miami and playing the Hurricanes. Miami won 48-33. So Mario Cristobal really has things kind of brewing there down in Miami. Shannon Dawson was a home run offensive coordinator hire so far. And Lance Guidry looks great at defensive coordinator. Basically, Tyler Van Dyke is back in the Heisman conversation in week 2 so far. So he went 21 of 30, 374 yards, 5 touchdowns. Last week, Miami ran the ball all over Miami of Ohio. This week, they threw the ball all over the Aggies. 451 yards of total offense, 374 yards passing. So Miami looked great. This was the signature win that Mario Cristobal was needing. So Miami is definitely starting out the year hot, whereas Jimbo Fisher, you are starting to hear the rumors. People think that they should get the $80 million and get him out of College Station. Next game, we had Charleston Southern at number 25 Clemson. Clemson won 66-17. First quarter, people started saying, oh, this game is way too close. Clemson was obviously going to beat the brakes off of this FCS team. I mean, let's be honest. So, Cade Klubnik, 28 of 37, 315 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Clemson looked better this game, but like I said, it's an FCS team, so I'm not putting anything into this game. But just look at these stats. Clemson had 679 yards of offense. Charleston Southern, 74 yards. 74 yards of total offense. So, the defense of Clemson, even though it's an FCS team, to give up only 74 yards, that's an accomplishment. So congratulations to them. Congratulations on that win. But they need to continue to do that versus Power 5 teams going into the rest of the regular season. So that's my breakdown of the top 25 games for week 2. Hit that like button.